Why did you write the letter and send it to the news agency? I wanted to.
Hello, this is Johanna from Travelers Paranormal. This presentation is going to be about Jack the Ripper, the Whitechapel murders. Before I go on, just a warning. I am going to have graphic details and photographs from the victims. If you are someone who would not want to see that, please skip this part of the video and jump straight to the investigation. So the Jack the Ripper case, some basic information. The murders happened between April 3rd, 1988 and February 13th, 1891. As I said, it's also called the Whitechapel murders. Whitechapel is a neighborhood in London. It was a seedier part of town with a mostly poor population. The area was home to many immigrants arriving in London and had a very dense population, growing to over 80,000 in the 1880s. One shocking statistic of the area was that 55% of children born in Whitechapel died before the age of 5. There are 11 victims under the name Whitechapel murders. However, only 5 are considered canon for Jack the Ripper. The others may have been murdered by someone else. Mary Ann Nichols was a native of London and mother of 6. She had separated from her husband, and due to an addiction to alcohol, her life began spiraling. In 1882, she was homeless and turned to prostitution to earn the 4 pence needed for a bed in one of the common houses of Whitechapel. She was last seen alive August 31st, 1888 at 2:30 a.m. She was found by 2 men at Buck's Row around 3:45 a.m. Her throat had been cut and she was disemboweled. Before I go on to the next slide, I'll give a warning again. There's a mortuary photograph, which will be a photograph of her body after an autopsy. If you do not want to see that, I highly recommend skipping either beyond the victim section of this presentation or to the investigation. Here I have Mary Nichols' mortuary photo and her death certificate. You can see on it the year 1888, her full name, and a description of the cause of death. The second victim was Annie Chapman. Like the other victims, Annie had fallen on hard times that resulted in her turning to prostitution to earn the money needed for a bed at night. On September 8, 1888, she was found murdered outside 29 Hanbury Lane, her throat cut, and her uterus, bladder, and vagina removed. This is a photo of Annie and her husband John in happier times, around 1869 or so. Photography had been around for a little bit, but it was rare to have a picture taken. Annie's death certificate here shows cause of death, violent injury to her throat and abdomen. Elizabeth Stride once owned a coffee shop, but after the failure of her shop and the death of her husband, she was lost to the streets. She was found on Berners Street in the early morning hours of September 30th, 1888. Her throat was cut, but not her abdomen, which sometimes casts doubt on her being one of the Ripper murders. However, it's likely that the murderer was interrupted. Again, here is a mortuary photo of Elizabeth Stride, and then her death certificate. Elizabeth and Catherine's murders are sometimes called the double event because both murders happened at the same night. She was picked up by an officer around 8:30 p.m. for drunkenness. After a few hours, she was released around 1 a.m. on September 30th. She was seen by several men talking to someone they didn't recognize. Just 10 minutes later, she would be dead. Her earlobes were mutilated, and she had multiple facial mutilations. Her uterus and left kidney had been removed, and again, her throat was cut. This is the mortuary photo of Catherine after the autopsy, and then again, her death certificate. The last of the 5 that are considered canon for Jack the Ripper would be Mary Jane Kelly. Unlike the others, she was murdered inside. The address was 13 Miller's Court. A neighbor, Elizabeth Prater, had heard crying for help around 4 a.m., but had not acted on it. As I said before at the very beginning, Whitechapel was a very poor district. Alcohol dependence and abuse were widespread, and cries for help at night was a common sound. Around 11 a.m. the next day, Mary Jane was found deceased, her throat cut, and her heart was missing. This is a photo of Mary and her death certificate. The decision on which ones to consider canon of the 11 comes down to methodology and victimology. The Jack the Ripper case, while not the first to use criminal profiling as we know it, was one of the early cases to start developing those investigation techniques. Methodology. The main injury that linked the victims was the cut throat. In each case, the wound analysis showed the attacker cut similar depth and from the same side. The crimes were also connected by similarity in the abdominal and genital mutilation. And finally, the third connection was the removal of organs and body parts. In some instances, organs were removed from the scene, but in most, there was mutilation and the organ was removed and placed under or near the body. Thomas Bond was a police surgeon. Looking at the different injuries and the victims, he used blood splattering and the wounds to kind of create what we would consider modern day profile. He said all 5 murders are no doubt committed by the same hand. In the first 4, the throats appear to have been cut from left to right. In the last case, owing to the extensive mutilation, it is impossible to say in what direction the fatal cut was made, but arterial blood was found on the wall in splashes close to where the woman's head must have been lying. He further said, "The circumstances surrounding the murders lead me to form the opinion that the women must have been laying down when murdered, and in every case the throat was cut first. The instrument must have been a strong knife, at least 6 inches long, very sharp, pointed at the top, and about 1 inch in width. It may have been a clasp knife, a butcher's knife, or a surgeon's knife. I think it was no doubt a straight knife." He also went into detail trying to get into the mind frame of the killer. Each of the 5 victims had a lot in common, from dealing with substance abuse to a lack of family support. The victims all worked as prostitutes, which allowed for Jack to approach and speak with them without causing alarm. A common phrase that I saw when reading about the victims was she died for lack of 4pence. The common houses charged 4pence for a bed for the night. These were large rooms that would just have rows of beds or bunk beds. Many of the victims were out at night earning the money that they needed to sleep in a bed. In summary, endemic poverty of the residents of Whitechapel correlated with violence and alcohol dependence resulted in many women turning to prostitution to survive. Jack chose his victims who were transient. They wouldn't have advocates to argue and search for their justice. He murdered and mutilated an area where cries for help would go unnoticed as they blended into the everyday sounds of life. If only 5 of the 11 Whitechapel murders are fully attributed to Jack the Ripper, was there a second serial murderer? Or was it the crimes against women were so prevalent, separating them proved impossible? Serial killers are a very popular topic today. For several reasons, in his day, Jack the Ripper was no different. Obviously, we still talk about this case today. The violent mutilation and shock value of the crime certainly helped bring the murderer to the attention of a wider population. Just like we have social media today, the penny papers were cheap newspapers that allowed details of the crime to reach beyond Whitechapel and beyond London. Also, a change in the role of education saw a larger percentage of the population becoming literate. Jack the Ripper in the 1880s was at prime time for a murder to grab the imagination and the attention of a wide audience. These are some examples of the illustrations that would show in the penny papers. Some of them cartoon-like, Jack the Ripper as a specter in the center there. Pictures giving details of finding bodies. Sketches saying, "Is this the man?" It's a lot like social media today, how we can use that to spread details, rumors, and theories. Another reason Jack the Ripper's case became so widespread was the use of photography. The first photo was taken in 1826. From that time to the 1880s, a lot had changed in photography. In around the 50s, 1850s, 1860s, is when photography started being used in crime scene research. You can tell from earlier with the pictures of the victims, photography was being used at the crime scene and during and after autopsies. Again, now instead of just a written word or a rumor traveling around, there were pictures. People were able to see with their own eyes what the crime scene looked like. What did the victim look like? It made it more real, and it made it grab their attention. Another reason the Ripper murders caught the attention of the world was the catchy name, and the fact that it was given to the killer by himself. On September 25, 1888, a letter, now known as the Boss Letter, was sent to the press. It took a few days, but eventually it was published as well. "Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I've laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I'm down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. The next job I do I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers, just for jolly. Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to go to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name, wasn't good enough to post this before. I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it, no luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now, ha ha." So in that letter, Jack the Ripper gives himself a name, talks about details of the case. A few days later, we have the Saucy Jack postcard. "I was not codding, dear old boss, when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jack's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number 1 squealed a bit. I couldn't finish straight off. Had not the time to get the ears for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper." So it's theorized that these first two letters, postcard, were written by somebody in the press. They would have had details of the crimes, so they would have known what to write. But still, publishing them sold a lot of papers and got a lot of attention. On October 6th, another letter arrived. This was a very different letter from the first two, and called the Letter from Hell. By Jack, he named it. This was addressed to Mr. Lusk. George Lusk had formed the Vigilance Committee. The Vigilance Committee was a group of business owners and residents who felt the police were not looking into the crimes hard enough or fast enough. And they were also going to help look into it. They did such things as patrol, watch, and they also raised some money to try and offer a reward for information. So what also came with that letter that was addressed to George Lusk was a piece of human liver. Thomas Openshaw of the London Hospital confirmed it was human, but also pointed out that any medical student could have sent that letter as a prank. Was it really from the murderer, or was it just a sick joke? So who was Jack the Ripper? Over 2,000 people were interviewed, upwards of 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were at some point detained. The true identity of Jack the Ripper is unknown. One possible suspect was Charles Allen Lechmer, aka Charles Cross. He was not the initial suspect that I was really going to focus on, but I gotta say, the more and more I researched, the more and more guilty he kind of looks. He is a meat cart driver for Pickford's. He lived in the area of Whitechapel, and all the murders happened along his route and along times when he may be wandering around, going to or from work, going to or from his family. At first, he was just thought to be an innocent witness. He was seen near the body of Mary Ann Nichols by a fellow named Robert Paul. He saw Robert Paul down the street and yelled to him, said, "Come over here, I found this woman here." Robert Paul comes over, wanted to help stand her up or sit her up, and Charles said, "No, let's not do that. We should probably get an officer." But then Charles left. Not only did he leave, he gave a fake name. He was a little cagey later when police did catch up to him to ask him about it. Robert Paul noted that when he first came over, there was no blood, but by the time the officer had arrived, there was a pool of blood, indicating that her throat had just recently been cut. So it's possible that Charles was just being difficult and maybe interrupted the killer in progress, or Charles was the killer and then cleverly covered for himself when Robert Paul wandered over. The suspect that until I read about Charles that I was really focused on and that I was focused on in my investigation is Francis Tumblety. I'd heard the rumor before that a lot of people suspected that Jack the Ripper was an American doctor. Well, Francis wasn't really a doctor. He was a con man and false doctor. He traveled around selling fake medicinal herbs and different concoctions. He had fled the U.S. and Canada after being connected to the death of at least one patient. I do believe it was more than that. And he found himself living in Whitechapel right around the time of the Ripper murders. He would have had some knowledge of the medical. He wasn't a real doctor, but as a child he had worked in a pharmacy that had a doctor in it who had questionable practices, and I haven't found anything more than that as to what that means, but that's what it was always referred to. He was known to hate women, and at a dinner party, he had decided to make a show of a collection of jars he had that had organs in them, most of them being feminine organs. So the fact that you have the Ripper murders, someone with maybe some crude medical knowledge, and a collection of organs, and he was there at the right time, makes him a very good candidate for being the actual Jack the Ripper. Due to the passage of time, we may never know who Jack the Ripper truly was, but there are many that are still going over details and trying to solve.
This is Johanna from Travelers Paranormal, and I'm completing the 17th challenge in the Para Games, the Serial Killer Challenge. So, challenge was 10 minutes, or pick a serial killer, explain a little bit about them, then 10 minutes with the S-Box, trying to make contact with them, victims, whatever, and then 5 minutes continuing blindfolded. So, the serial killer that I have chosen is Jack the Ripper. So, Jack the Ripper was in Whitechapel, an area of London, England, kind of a seedy area. There are 11 victims that may be connected to Jack the Ripper, but 5 of them are considered canon. Like, definitely Jack the Ripper, they're really sure about that. And that was between August 1888 to November 1880. Let's see here if I can do this. So Mary Ann, then Annie, Elizabeth and Catherine, I think, were killed on the same night, and then there was a Mary Jane. So those are the 5 main ones that they're pretty sure are connected to Jack the Ripper. One way that he gained notoriety was, can't say that word right, by sending a letter to the press, actually. I think probably one of the first times that happened. It created a lot of people who were calling it hoaxes, saying that they were the hymns, they were the killer. Lots of letters after that, once they put it in the newspaper, of people claiming to be Jack the Ripper. He also sent a postcard to the same press agency, claiming that he was going to damage the ear of one of his victims, and then he did. So they think that letter writer may have actually been the real person, the letter and the postcard. Never caught. Lots of suspects as to who it could have been. Some theories are that it was an American doctor, and then there's a couple of American doctors that are suspected off of that. One guy is Francis Tumulty, I think is his last name. He lived in New York, went to England, was kind of a con man. He was like selling elixirs and stuff. I don't even know if he was really a doctor, but he claimed to be. He went to England. He was in England around that time. Something linked him to possibly being linked to Abraham Lincoln's assassination, but I'm not sure about that. And he was acquitted of that anyway. But, so, the Whitechapel murders, very violent. Whitechapel was a seedy area anyway, lots of drunkenness, prostitution, homelessness. It was a bad area. And basically all these women were prostitutes and drunks, and terrible life histories to go with that. He would slit their throat, disembowel them. One had organs removed, or at least one had organs removed, which is why they suspect the doctor. So, I'm going to turn the volume up and see if we can make any contact. This is Johanna from Travelers Paranormal. I'm interested in learning about Jack the Ripper. Is there anyone here that could help? I think. I know the murders were committed in Whitechapel, London, England, so we're quite far away from there. Is there anyone here who has any information about Jack the Ripper? Maybe. What can you tell me? Can you tell me his name or the name of one of his victims? I've got a couple of voices, but I didn't understand anything. Mary Jane, the night you were killed, your neighbor heard a yell. Did you see who your attacker was? Again, I'm in Tennessee, a long way off from England, so I don't know how communication works over space and time. I picked Jack the Ripper for a couple of reasons. One, it's an interesting case, but two, it is pretty removed. I know the TV show Dahmer brought up a lot of questions about ethics in using serial killers for entertainment. their stories, because their victims have family members that are still alive. Jack the Ripper feels like a pretty safe one. The Whitechapel murders were unsolved. Is there anyone that can tell me who the killer was? What was his real name? One reason people suspected Francis Tumulty is apparently he said he hated women, or people thought he hated women. But also at a dinner party, he showed off like jars of organs. So, given some of the brutalness of the murders, he became suspect. That's when he'd already moved back to St. Louis, or back to the States and to St. Louis. I think he's buried in Rochester, New York. Jack the Ripper, if you can hear me, can you tell me your real name? Why did you name yourself that? You referred to yourself that way and signed the letter that way. Why'd you pick that name? Was Jack your real name? Edward? Are you saying that's your name? How did you pick your victims? Did you know them? Sounded like a female voice said yes. Or maybe it said Annie. Jack, if you can hear me, how did you pick your victims? I think you said chance. I think that's what I heard. Were they just picked random? If this is really you, Jack the Ripper, what did you call yourself in the postcard? Can you tell me what you called yourself? Prove it's you. How many victims in total did you have? I think I heard 10. Did you know their names? Can you say their names? It's my timer. Now I got 5 minutes blindfolded. Maybe this will help me concentrate more on the S class. Is there anyone here who has knowledge of the Whitechapel murders? If there is, can you tell me your name? Can you speak up, please? It's hard to hear you. Why did you write the letter and send it to the news agency? I wanted to. Was this a game to you? What was your motivation? I wanted it. Did you know your victim? Can any of the victims of Jack the Ripper hear me? If so, what is your name? I think I heard a woman say Annie. I think I had that before too. Annie, are you here? Is there anyone that can tell me the real name of Jack the Ripper? So I'm standing in grass, and I'm standing still, and I feel like I just heard, like, footsteps on crunchy grass. It's like 30 degrees out, so it's, you know when it's cold? I feel like I heard footsteps. Is there anyone here with me? If there's someone here with me, can you tell me your name? If there's someone here walking in the grass, can you tell me your name? I'm running out of time. Is there anyone here who can tell me the name, the real name of Jack the Ripper? I think it said evil something. My timer's going off. Maybe it's an evil man. The person who said evil man, can you tell me his name? Okay. Oh, I'm out of time. I don't know who made contact. I think I heard Annie a couple of times, which is one of the victims. One of the victims' names. Oof, it's cold. I really think I heard footsteps, though. Which is a little unnerving and interesting. So, hopefully, I'll listen back. Hopefully I got something there. But this one was an interesting one. I've enjoyed researching the story, the victims, and I'll put a little presentation at the front of this video to give some more information. But yeah, this is Johanna from Travelers Paranormal. This is my 17th challenge in the Para Games. I'd like to thank What the Paranormal. Okay. I'd like to thank What the Paranormal for keeping the challenges going, and I look forward to seeing the other videos in this set. I know I've already seen a couple go up, so I don't know, serial killers is just a topic that's interested me since I was young. Maybe I'm weird, but I also do paranormal investigation, so I guess we know that already. So this is an interesting one, this is a good one, I really like it. Thank you for watching, and see what next week brings. Bye.